in Europe as Russia's launched an invasion and an attack on Ukraine. We'll bring you the very latest from Ukraine itself, from Westminster and throughout Europe over the next hour. We'll be asking what is Vladimir Putin hoping to achieve with this military action against a sovereign state. We'll be discussing in depth what precisely Moscow might do next and what we here in London, Brussels and Washington, how they will react. And we'll be analysing that response, whether it involves sanctions, diplomacy or even the possibility of military action. It is a significant day, something the French president said is a turning point in European history. As always, want to hear what you've got to say, do get in touch. GBViews and GBnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. An hour of special coverage between 3 and 4 on this developing story. But first, at the top, let's bring you the very latest news at 3.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the UK and its allies will respond to Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine with a massive package of sanctions. Boris Johnson's pledged to do everything he can to keep Britain safe, adding that Moscow's actions must end in failure. Russian military vehicles marked with the letter Z have already entered Ukraine, with police saying there have been just over 200 Russian attacks so far today. New images this afternoon show rescue workers at the crash site of a Ukrainian armed forces aircraft. Earlier, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan was the latest world leader to meet with President Putin. Mr. Johnson says the UK won't turn a blind eye to the attacks.
We and the world cannot allow that freedom just to be snuffed out. We cannot and will not just look away. Today, in concert with our allies, we will agree a massive package of economic sanctions designed in time to hobble the Russian economy. Our mission is clear. Diplomatically, politically, economically, and eventually militarily, this hideous and barbaric venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure.
The Prime Minister addressing the nation earlier. Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU is united in responding against the Kremlin's actions.
What is at stake is the stability of Europe and the whole international order, our peace order. President Putin chose to bring war back to Europe.
Ursula von der Leyen speaking in Brussels earlier, as did NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. He said the Kremlin's intentions are clear for the world to see.
Russia has attacked Ukraine. This is a brutal act of war. Peace on our continent has been shattered. We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, urged citizens to become blood donors in hospitals for wounded soldiers.
The Ukrainian armed forces were involved in heavy fighting, repelling attacks in Donbass and other regions, east, north, south. The enemy sustained serious losses, and the enemy will sustain many more losses. They came on our land. We're already handing out weapons, and we'll hand out them to defend our country to everyone who wants and has the capacity to defend our sovereignty. The future of Ukraine depends on every citizen.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky there. In other news, all remaining COVID restrictions in England end today. That means people who test positive with the virus will no longer legally have to isolate. It's part of the Prime Minister's Living with COVID strategy, which also includes scrapping universal testing from April. The Queen has cancelled more planned virtual engagements today following her COVID diagnosis last week. That's been confirmed by Buckingham Palace, and it follows other cancelled virtual meetings at the start of the week, with the monarch still suffering with mild cold-like symptoms. The palace says Her Majesty will continue with light duties. Students starting university in September will now have to start paying back their loans as soon as they earn more than £25,000 a year. That's part of the government's response into the Auger review, which looks into funding within higher education. The current threshold for repaying student loans is just over £27,000. And the UK has pledged £160 million to speed up the development of vaccines against deadly diseases. The funding will go towards preparing for future epidemics, with an aim to slash the time it takes to make a vaccine to 100 days. That's a third of the time it took to develop the first COVID jab. It will also help developing further vaccines to protect against future COVID-19 strains. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, including the latest on Ukraine. Now back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, very good afternoon and welcome to the briefing on this Thursday. There is war in Europe again as Russia decided in the early hours of this morning via air, sea and land to attack Ukraine, a democratic country in the east of Europe. It is likely to see, in response this afternoon in Washington, Brussels and London, quite severe sanctions. How far will that go? Will it make Vladimir Putin think again? It seems not. Well, in the last few hours, our Prime Minister Boris Johnson has addressed the nation. He'd vowed to hit Russia with a massive package of sanctions designed to say, well, he said so, to hobble Moscow's economy following Putin's vast invasion of Ukraine. It comes as also in the last couple of hours, the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg and the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen held a joint press conference. The NATO Secretary-General said today is one of the darkest days in modern history of Europe. Well, let's go, first of all, in the next couple of minutes, to our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, to our Economics Editor, Liam Halligan. But first, our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, is outside Downing Street for us this afternoon. Tom, very good afternoon to you. Just talk us through what the Prime Minister had to say a little bit earlier.
Well, the Prime Minister has had a busy day and we have not heard the half of it yet. Of course, in his address to the nation that was pre-recorded and released at around midday today, the Prime Minister set out the resolute strength and allyship that the UK is offering to Ukraine, not in terms of policy, but in terms of moral support more than anything else at this time. Of course, reiterating what has already been set out, the support that has already been provided to Ukraine, whether it's anti-tank missiles or anything further that Number 10 is not willing to divulge, also defensive equipment. We're also releasing more of the aircraft that are dedicated to NATO to patrol the skies of neighbouring countries, of Poland and of Romania. Those are British jets doing so, bordering Ukraine. But more than that, at 5 p.m. today, the Prime Minister will address the House of Commons, where we can expect him to lay out in policy terms what more will be done in order to combat Russia, in order to bring forward sanctions that will target the Kremlin. And it's likely these will be highly coordinated with what goes on in the United States of America and within the European Union. We know that London has been talking to Brussels and Washington DC throughout the last few weeks in order to coordinate the sanctions effort and the iterative process of sanctions as began on Tuesday, but as will undoubtedly unfold to a larger degree later today. We also know that the Prime Minister has been having a number of meetings with the leaders of many countries, from Prime Minister Modi of India to the leaders of the UAE, a country that of course supplies us with a lot of gas. That is going to be very important as the weeks and months roll on and as sanctions and indeed war interrupts Russian gas flow to Europe. So yes, a lot of work going on in the building behind me, but a lot more to be done.
Yeah, and indeed, Tom, we know that the Russian ambassador was summoned, wasn't he, to the Foreign Office. We're told Liz Truss kind of essentially tore into him in a very, very short meeting that lasted less than 10 minutes.
Yes, the number I heard was 5 minutes that the Russian ambassador was in there. And of course, this is not the first time that the Russian ambassador has been summoned to the Foreign Indeed, that has happened a number of times, not only in the last few years, but actually in the last few days as well. It's becoming a bit of a routine situation. However, I feel it's unlikely that there is going to be a diplomatic expulsion over this. That would sever diplomatic relations with Russia, which would be a big step to do and would potentially hamper the communication that we could have with Russia as this crisis unfolds. So likely admonishment going forward, but not a severance of relations.
OK, Tom, appreciate that. And Tom will be across, of course, what the Prime Minister has to say when he addresses MPs in the House of Commons. We're expecting the announcement of those sanctions at around 5 p.m. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, joining us from Downing Street. Taking place right now at the moment is actually the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, who's currently talking to the UK media, setting out, of course, Kyiv's position when it comes to what's happening in Ukraine. The ambassador there holding a press conference. We're hoping to show you the pictures, but we can't at this moment in time, but we will a little later on in the programme bring you any lines out of that press conference as it happens. Let's speak, though, to Mark White. He's our Home Affairs and Security Editor who's been monitoring developments for us this afternoon. Mark, good afternoon to you. We have seen attacks, as I say, from the land, sea and air. What is the latest when it comes to where we're at in all of this? I think 10 hours into this effective invasion.
But this is radical.
Yes, indeed. I mean, those attacks are ongoing. We're told that they have targeted Kiev itself, or at least military installations in and around Kiev, including a military airport on the outskirts of Kiev, in which, according to the Ukrainians, 3 Russian attack helicopters have been shot down. They're also reporting that a number of Ukrainian troops and other people have been caught up in that particular attack, and some have died as a result. In addition to this, in Odessa, in the south of Ukraine, 18 people, we're told, have died, caught up in a missile strike there. Again, Mariupol, a residential complex in Mariupol, the port city on the Black Sea, has also been struck by shells, we understand. So it's all still ongoing. Just an hour or so ago, the air raid sirens sounded in Kiev again, with a number of people scurrying to air raid shelters in the capital. So a great deal of concern about what is next in the game plan of Vladimir Putin. But as we understand it, the targets mainly this morning and into this afternoon, our time, have been those command and control functions of the Ukrainian military, including air defences, with a view, of course, from Russia's perspective of gaining control of the air. You get control of the air, it makes the advancing of your ground forces much easier.
And in the last couple of days, reports that there's heavy fighting, according to Ukrainian Interior Ministry sources, in and around Chernobyl, of course, which is north of Kiev. Just in regards to this, Mark, we know the Ukrainians have said they're going to put up a fight. I'm sure they will. But in the end, the sheer scale of these Russian forces will overwhelm the Ukrainians. It is only a matter of time, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, in some respects, you know, the Ukrainians have a very significant, large land army, far bigger than the UK's, for instance, some 200,000 plus full-time members of the army. And in reserve, they have hundreds of thousands of people. Indeed, today, the Ukrainian president has called for all those with military experience, as well as the reservists, to report for duty to defend the country from Russian aggression. But the difficulty is there's only so much that ground troops can do, especially if they lack some of the key equipment to be able to fend off Russian heavy artillery and tanks rolling into their territory. And that is, I think, why we're seeing the Ukrainians targeting Air Force sites, air defences, command and control structures, because once you've got command of the air, you can roll your tanks, your battle groups into eastern Ukraine proper, and then you come up against, yes, a land army, but then you, as the Russians in this instance, have your air force able to work unhindered in support of those ground troops. And that is the real concern when you've got an air force above, a navy at sea, and a land army coming at you. If all you've got at that time is a land army because your air force has been taken out, and there isn't much really of a Ukrainian naval presence to speak of, then it is very, very difficult to see how Ukraine can really resist in any meaningful way.
Okay, and we were just looking at images there of the fact that very few jets, in terms of jets, I'm talking about passenger jets flying in and around Ukraine, of course, most air traffic avoiding unsurprisingly the area. Mark, for the time being, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Mark White there, Home Affairs and Security Editor, who's going to stay with us throughout the programme to bring us up to date, just to bring you up to date with what President Zelensky's been saying in the last couple of minutes about that attack on Chernobyl. He's claiming that Russian troops are trying to seize the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Of course, this is a power plant that was shut down in the mid-80s after that terrible tragedy. Mr. Zelensky tweeting in the last couple of minutes, our defenders, that is the army, are trying their lives so the tragedy of 1986 will not be repeated. This is a declaration of war against the whole of Europe. OK, well, let's stay with this, and let's go to Ukraine now, actually, and speak to a member of parliament there, Alex Gorgachenko, who joined us down the line. Alex, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just talk us through what you know, what you're seeing, what the situation is where you are.
I'm in Kiev. The situation in Kiev is calm, but we know that there are fightings around the city. There are Russian paratroopers around, there are bombings, missile attacks, and now people are receiving weapons, those who are ready to fight. And that's the situation for the moment.
What is the sense there you have amongst your constituents, the people of Kiev, about their fears, I suppose, about what may well happen tonight and in the days to come?
We understand that the enemy will try to engage to Kiev, the capital, and that's a real threat. We hope that we will finally hear, after almost a day of invasion, the sanctions from the West for this brutal violation of everything. And we are fighting not only for Ukraine, but we are fighting for the whole civilized world. And when just ordinary people in Ukraine are receiving weapons to fight, probably that should have some, answer from the West with the really strong sanctions against Russian Federation. We are waiting for them.
There's lots of suggestions that Vladimir Putin is essentially trying to impose a puppet regime in Kiev. What would your and other parliamentarians' response to that be?
We've heard the rumors that it could be former President Yanukovych who ran away from the country. It was 8 years ago, and who is convicted in Ukraine according to our law. So that they would want that maybe they want to install him as a new puppet governor of Ukraine. But we are fighting for the moment, and our armed forces are really stopping on some of the directions Russian aggressor. So we will see what will be in the next days.
And just very finally, Alex, we're, as you have rightly pointed out, expecting the announcement of sanctions here in London, but also from Brussels and Washington in the next couple of hours. What would you like to see the West do now to try and help you guys in Ukraine?
Complete ban and embargo on Russian oil and gas. Complete. Because this oil and gas is full of Ukrainian blood. And also disconnecting of Russian Federation from the world's finance system. I'm speaking about SWIFT system. So disconnecting Russia from SWIFT. That's two things that Russia will feel.
Okay, Alex, I see you're on the move there as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Ukrainian Parliament there, joining us live from Kiev this evening. That is the current Ukrainian ambassador to London, who's addressing members of the media here in London about what needs to happen. He's talking there to members of the press just down the road from us. Clearly, many people waiting for bated breath about what potentially the Prime Minister and others will announce in the next couple of hours. On that very note, let's bring in our economics editor, Liam Halligan, who's in the studio with us. Liam, thank you for joining us. What does the Prime Minister, do we think, mean when he talks about these massive sanctions that we can expect from not just the Brits, but also the Europeans and the Americans too?
That is the big question. And I think when we look back on this period, Darren, I think future historians will conclude that Vladimir Putin has deliberately timed this action when there is a cost of living crisis already across much of the Western world. As we've come out of this pandemic, we've got high inflation in America, we've got high inflation here in the UK, interest rates rising, ordinary households finding it hard to make ends meet. And now, if the West imposes a massive package of sanctions, as the Prime Minister says we're going to, Russia could retaliate. And it's on the danger of that retaliation that we're already seeing global energy markets in turmoil. The oil price has gone up at one point almost 10% today. I was just looking at wholesale wheat prices while sitting next to you. Wholesale wheat prices are up 11% today. Russia, of course, is the world's biggest wheat exporter. We have natural gas prices, wholesale natural gas prices, up 40% at one point today.
Rolls-Royce today talking about 20% of its titanium for its engines.
And it's not just the big headline commodities that we're all learning about now as journalists, oil, gas, wheat. It's also, as you rightly say, those obscure-sounding industrial metals that are absolutely vital to our Western way of life. Titanium, palladium, nickel. These are the metals that keep Western car factories, manufacturers going, and Russia has a grip on the world supply of many of them. That is the reality. That is the reality. And Putin knows that reality, so he can now have leverage over the West. If we impose sanctions, he can cut off, he can divert his oil and gas to China. He's got pipelines going to China now, which he didn't have.
Yeah, I saw China today saying they're going to buy lots of the surplus wheat that might not go
that's
through.
Right.
But in the end, and this is kind of the catch-22 situation in some ways for Europe, is in order for these sanctions to properly hit Russia, they're going to have to properly hit us too.
That's right. That's right. And at a time when the cost of living crisis is spiralling. You know, you and I have been talking for a month on GBNews about helping our viewers and listeners to beat the squeeze anyway, because we know the cost of living crisis is out there. And that's the really difficult trade-off for Boris Johnson, for Joe Biden, for leaders across Europe and the Western world as a whole. Yes, they want to be seen to be responding to this blatant act of aggression by Putin in order to uphold the Western hegemony, or at least our sense that we are morally on the right side of history most of the time. But to do so provokes a response that could see an awful lot of our ordinary men and women, households struggling to make ends meet, suffer. And in the end, that's going to be felt at the ballot box. And Putin knows that, which maybe we could conclude in future months and years why he's timed this right now.
OK, Liam, as always, appreciate your analysis. Liam's going to stay with us throughout the programme as well. Liam Halligan, our economics editor, joining us in the studio. OK, we're going to take a quick commercial break here on GB News and the briefing this afternoon. Coming up to 24 minutes past 3 o'clock, we'll have continuing coverage of the developing situation of the attack on Ukraine. More specifically, what is Vladimir Putin's endgame? That and much more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News. It is 27 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet us at GB News about what you think we in the West should be doing to respond to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In the last couple of minutes, we were just showing you pictures, weren't we, before the break of that press conference involving the Ukrainian ambassador talking to the UK press. Apparently he has expressed a desire to see the UK impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. It's something that must be said the British government has not ruled out, though it seems at the moment pretty unlikely. And also in the last couple of minutes, President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, saying that Russian forces are trying to seize the Chernobyl nuclear plant, of course, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster back in the 1980s. We're going to get the very latest from Mark White, our Home Affairs editor, and indeed from Ian Hannigan, our economics editor, a little later on in the programme. But let's now focus on Russia's ally in the region, Belarus, because according to reports, they too may well be involved in this military action. We know, of course, that Russian troops have been based in Belarus for the last couple of months. We know that the Belarusian dictator Lukashenko has warned that Belarus will go to war if Russia is attacked by NATO. Well, join me now is a special advisor to the Belarusian presidential candidate. That is Frenak Vyakorka, who joins us down the line. Frenak, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon here on GB News. Just give us a sense of Belarus's role in all of this. I saw that President Lukashenko today was suggesting that troops from Belarus have not entered Ukraine, but they could still do so.
Yeah, it's true. He said that Belarus troops did not enter Ukraine. And here I can say he is either not in control or he is lying. Because Belarus troops are involved in this operation since very early morning today. First of all, Lukashenko's air defense, the border control guards, they all participated along with Russian troops in the invasion, which started early morning today. Yes, perhaps we don't have proofs that Belarusian tanks are there, but this is the matter of time. Lukashenko understands that the idea of war is not popular at all among Belarusians. Belarusians support Ukraine. This is why his message about Belarus not participating, it was only dedicated to Belarusians, but people don't believe him.
And of course, we saw massive protests, didn't we, within the last couple of years in Belarus in reaction to President Lukashenko essentially forging that election. Do you think President Putin's endgame is to achieve in Kiev what he's achieved in Minsk, which is essentially a puppet regime that is close to the Kremlin?
We can say that Belarus is the softer version of what happens in Ukraine right now. Putin wants to control all the neighbors, all the post-Soviet countries. He has a special historical concept, like all of those who speak the Russian language, they belong to Russia. In Belarus, there is a difference from Ukraine that the government doesn't belong to people. Lukashenko's regime is not opposing Russian invasion, but opposite, it is collaborating. In contrast to Ukrainian government and President Zelensky, who mobilized the army to defend their motherlands.
And what in terms of refugees as well? Because we are expecting, and we've seen images of people gathering at train stations. We saw enormous queues of traffic trying to leave the Ukrainian capital earlier on today. Is there a sense that some Ukrainians would seek refuge in Belarus as well as Poland and elsewhere?
Oh, I don't think they will seek in Belarus, because Belarus participates in war. Moreover, Belarus becomes the most active and perhaps the only ally for Putin. So I don't think Belarus is safe for them at all. I could predict there will be many refugees from Belarus along with Ukraine, and they will be trying to get to European Union. They will be trying to get to any safe country. And I'm not sure if our neighbors are ready to accept so many people. We are basically coming into the most dangerous stage of this conflict, where many people can lose their lives, and there will be huge flows of refugees coming to European Union.
Very finally, we've been focusing, of course, understandably today on Ukraine. Where are we to date with the situation in Belarus itself? We saw those massive protests. They were, frankly, quite brutally suppressed. Is Lukashenko in many ways more secure than ever?
Oh, he's the most fragile and insecure as ever. And this is why he's serving Putin. Just look at him, his puppet, his vassal. He wants to please Putin because this is the only guarantee he will stay in his presidential position. In Belarus, he's not respected at all. His support ranking is 15% maximum. But after today's invasion, it will be even less. Therefore, he participates in this war because he wants to stay in power by all means.
Really fascinating stuff. Appreciate your time this afternoon. That's Vanak Vajakorka joining us there from Belarus, very astutely pointing out that actually this will not be particularly welcome by the Belarusian people, that an attack on their neighbouring country, of course, of Ukraine being facilitated by President Lukashenko in Belarus. OK, it is, 27 minutes to 4 o'clock with a pause there on the briefing. Lots more to come, though, between now and 4. But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news.
It's 3:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's president says his forces are now fighting to prevent Russian troops from capturing the former nuclear power plant at Chernobyl. In response to the invasion, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's announced the UK and its allies will respond with a massive package of sanctions. He's pledged to do everything he can to keep Britain safe, adding that Moscow's actions must end in failure. He says the UK won't turn a blind eye to the attacks.
We and the world cannot allow that freedom just to be snuffed out. We cannot and will not just look away. Today, in concert with our allies, we will agree a massive package of economic sanctions designed in time to hobble the Russian economy. Our mission is clear. Diplomatically, politically, economically, and eventually militarily, this hideous and barbaric venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure.
In other news, all remaining COVID restrictions in England have now been lifted. That means people who test positive with the virus no longer legally have to isolate. It follows the Prime Minister's Living with COVID strategy, which also includes scrapping universal testing from April. Students starting university in September will now have to start paying back their loans as soon as they earn more than £25,000 a year. That's part of the government's response into the Orgar review, which looks into funding within higher education. The current threshold for repaying student loans is just over £27,000. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll have the latest headlines on Ukraine at the top of the hour. See you then.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. Coming up to 20 minutes to 4 o'clock. Lots of you getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Peter says we need to put boots on the ground in Ukraine to impose sanctions while a nation is ripped apart. It's like freezing a man's bank account while you watch him attack your wife. It's not good enough. Tony says if Russia turns off Nord Stream 1, the European economy is doomed. Kevin says NATO has the capability to knock out Russia's tanks and equipment now. They should do so. Putin doesn't want to die, which he would never do if the war went nuclear. He knows that this is a war he would lose. Just saying in the last couple of minutes, by the way, GBViews, gbnews.uk, Reuters quoting a senior US defense official saying that Russia, this is according to their intelligence, has every intention of decapitating the Ukrainian government, and that Russians are making a move on Kiev, assaulting essentially the main population centres to try and take control. Let's get the latest now. Join our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, who remains with us this hour. Mark, just bring us up to date there. US intelligence setting out probably something that is unsurprising, that they want to decapitate the government in Kiev. And all this while we hear that there's quite intensive fighting, rather disturbingly, around Chernobyl.
Yes, I mean, as far as those Chernobyl reports are concerned, I think we have to take it with some degree of caution. I'm not quite sure what the military advantage for Russia would be in taking over a redundant nuclear power plant, the scene of that terrible meltdown in '86, I think it was. There were 3 other reactors there that were active until about 2000 that have been closed down. So the plant is being decommissioned and under Ukrainian control. So the Ukrainian government, the authorities are saying that Russia has taken control of that power plant. But just, I think, wait to bottom this out, see exactly what's going on in that area. It may be the Russian troops are in that area, but not necessarily looking as such to take control of this now sort of redundant power plant, which is part of a huge exclusion zone because of all the radioactivity in that area. In terms of the fighting, it's still going on very significantly. We're told that the Ukrainian military is putting up a significant fight, that its forces have downed 3 Russian attack helicopters at a military airport outside Kiev, the capital. But of course, those missile strikes, Grad rockets that have come over from Russia, as well as attacks from the air, from jets and from attack helicopters, have been continuing throughout the morning and into the afternoon. A couple of hours ago, Ukraine said that a second wave of missile strikes was underway. And it appears at this stage, even though there have been some reports of residential areas being hit, that primarily the targets appear to be command and control structures for the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian government, and indeed Air Force, air defence capability around Ukraine as well, because clearly, obviously, if you get control of the skies over Ukraine, you can put, as Vladimir Putin's point of view, you can put your own forces in the air over there, and that allows the ground troops, the Russian main force, to come over the border into eastern Ukraine and wherever indeed else it wants to go to in Ukraine with a lot more ease than you would if the Ukrainian Air Force was still operational.
And Mark, just quickly, we're hearing that the Ukrainian ambassador, we were just showing the press conference some pictures a little earlier on, has said that actually some British-supplied military kit has been used to shoot down some of that Russian aircraft. And we keep focusing on sanctions, but there's clearly a bit of the UK's response that will continue, at least in the short term, to supply weapons to the Ukrainian military.
Well, I mean, that claim doesn't surprise me and may well be true. We know that thousands of shoulder-launched missiles have been sent from the UK to the Ukraine in recent weeks. And in addition to that, about 100 UK military personnel were in Ukraine until things obviously started heating up in the last week or so when they were pulled out. And they were involved in training the Ukrainian forces in how to use those shoulder-launched missiles. Anti-tank missiles can also be used to shoot down aircraft as well. The Ukrainian military, in many respects, of course, is dwarfed by the might of the Russian military. But what it lacks as well is a very significant air force. There's no real naval presence to speak of anymore. And the ground troops clearly lack a lot of the sort of heavy armour and tanks that Russia have. They have some, but shoulder-launched missiles and systems similar to that were seen as a very important addition militarily to Ukraine, and they were very thankful for that from the British government. So it doesn't surprise me, and there may be some truth to what the ambassador has been saying about British missile systems bringing down Russian aircraft.
OK, Mark, appreciate that. And Mark will remain with us throughout the afternoon, brings up to date with what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. Let's bring in our economics editor, Liam Halligan, who is in the studio with us as well. Liam, we've seen a big spike, haven't we, in terms of oil and gas prices today. And that really is going to put on the squeeze further, isn't it, in regards to people's living standards that had already been calls before this invasion for the government to do more. I suspect those calls are only going to grow louder.
They are. Every day, Monday to Friday, I present On the Money here on GB News. And in recent weeks, we've been really focused on energy costs, even before this escalation in tension between Russia and Ukraine, because we know there's a big increase in energy costs coming in April anyway. And we know there's lots of lower income and vulnerable families out there who are going to really struggle to pay those bills. Now we've got this extra complication in global energy markets, to put it mildly. And so it's really going to come into focus now. Previously, nerdy ideas like gas storage and the nuclear waste, suddenly they're coming centre stage. They're becoming mainstream politics. You know, I interviewed a leading Tory backbencher yesterday. We're going to show his interview today. Steve Baker, he's well known, a campaigner. He's part of this net zero group of backbench MPs. We're going to show the interview later because today doesn't feel right given what's happening in Ukraine. But he told me there's now real concern among backbenchers, not just Tory backbenchers, about the impact of energy prices in terms of bringing about poverty here in the United Kingdom, fuel poverty, proper deprivation, given that fuel costs are such a high percentage share of the budgets of many low-income families.
And people suggesting that, you know, if you spend lots of money on fuel, it means that you can't necessarily afford the food or the clothes.
Indeed. At the sharp end, there are going to be some really tough decisions for households to make.
And all this as the government's talking about increasing taxes.
Well, here you go. This is where the rubber hits the road. 25% of your energy bill, what you pay for your electricity, on average, if you're a household, goes into renewable subsidies, which often go to big energy conglomerates, landowners, making wind farms, research institutes and so on, to promote the idea of renewable energy. There is going to be huge pressure. Once the initial shock of Russia, Ukraine and sanctions has worn off, there's going to be huge pressure on the government to at least delay those renewable subsidies which people must pay on their fuel bills. Guess what? They just did that in Germany yesterday. They removed those renewable subsidies that people are paying on their household energy bills. Plus, there's going to be big pressure on the government, as we've been saying here on GB News, scrap the VAT, to remove that VAT on fuel bills, on household utility bills, something we can do now we've left the European Union, again, as a temporary measure. The whole notion of energy security is about to become an absolutely front and centre mainstream political issue. Things like gas storage, things like let's get that new generation of nuclear power stations built, because there's nothing like a conflict to focus minds and to demonstrate just how vulnerable this major country is, this economy of ours is to overseas ebbs and flows of energy.
OK, Liam, as always, appreciate your analysis. Liam Halligan there, our economics editor. Back with On the Money, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, Liam. Well, we've heard, of course, from the Prime Minister today. He is also due to address MPs. We'll get further details of those sanctions at around 5 o'clock this afternoon in the House of Commons. But we've also heard from Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, in the last hour or so. And this is what the Labour leaders had to say.
In this dark hour, our thoughts, our solidarity and our resolve are with the Ukrainian people. They've been cast into a war, not through fault of their own, but because Putin knows that no people will choose to live under his bandit rule unless forced to, at the barrel of a gun. The consequences of Putin's war will be horrendous and tragic for the Ukrainian people, but also for the Russian people, who've been plunged into chaos by a violent elite who have stolen their wealth, stolen their chance of democracy, and stolen their future. And we must prepare ourselves for difficulties here. We will see economic pain as we free Europe from dependence on Russian gas and clean our institutions from money stolen from the Russian people. But the British public have always been willing to make sacrifice, to defend democracy on our continent, and we will again. Russia's democratic neighbours and every other democracy that lives in the shadow of autocratic power are watching their worst nightmare unfold. All those who believe in democracy over dictatorship, the rule of law over the reign of terror, in freedom over the jackboot of tyranny, must unite and take a stand and ensure Putin fails. We must make a clean break with the failed approach to handling Putin, which after Georgia, Crimea and Donbass fed his belief that the benefits of aggression outweigh the costs. We must finally show him he is wrong. That means doing all we can to help Ukraine defend herself, urgently reinforcing and reassuring our NATO allies in Eastern Europe. And the hardest possible sanctions must be taken against the Putin regime. It must be isolated, its finances frozen, its ability to function crippled. And there are changes we must make here in the UK. For too long, our country has been a safe haven for the money that Putin and his fellow bandits stole from the Russian people. It must end now. And this must be a turning point in our history. We must look back and say that this terrible day was actually when Putin doomed himself to defeat. He seeks division, so we must stay united. He hopes for inaction, so we must take a stand. He believes that we're too corrupted to do the right thing, so we must prove him wrong. I believe we can, but only if we stand together.
You got that. So Keir Starmer speaking a little bit earlier on. Let's bring in Crispin Blunt. He's a Conservative MP, the former chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and joins us from Parliament. Crispin, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We were talking yesterday, weren't we? I don't think anyone, or very few people, were expecting this invasion on the scale that it has today. What would you like to hear from the Prime Minister when he stands up in front of MPs in the next hour? How far do you want him to go?
Well, I want him to deliver on our implicit obligations under the Budapest Memorandum. They're moral obligations. They may not be strictly legal in the sense of the mutual security relationship that comes with formal NATO membership. But the implication for the United Kingdom as a signatory to the Budapest Memorandum is that we are going to come to Ukraine's aid. And how are we going to do that? And what I hope we are doing is having conversations with the United States about how far they are prepared to go in giving military support to the Ukrainians, whether it's in the air, whether it's the air and the cyberspace. But they need those battle-winning capabilities to be able to hang in there against the Russian forces. And that is where I hope we will be prepared to go alongside the United States if they're prepared to go there. There'll be other questions for other NATO members, and the whole issue of the NATO security guarantee obviously now applies very actively to all the new NATO members on Russia's borders. But I want us to be exploring every option.
So you seem to be backing the Ukrainian ambassador's position, the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK's position, that the UK should look at a no-fly zone, for example, over Ukraine.
Yes, I think we should. It's something Ukraine is perfectly entitled to ask for. And I think it is something that we ought to be prepared to give them. Obviously, it depends on the United States. But if the United States is prepared to do it, the United Kingdom should be in lockstep with them and making it clear that we are prepared to assist them in giving a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
And finally, Crispin, does the government here need to go further in terms of tackling Russian money in London? We heard what Chris Bryant had to say in the Commons a little earlier.
Are you about to give him a clip? I didn't hear him, so I was waiting for the clip.
I was just quickly about Russian money in London.
Yeah.
More needs to be done there, and pretty swift.
Yes, and obviously we've now got to make life as difficult as possible for Russian citizens. We don't want their money now invested in London. They have put themselves beyond the pale by this appalling acts of aggression against a friendly neighbouring state. And we must be taking every conceivable measure. We are, in effect, at economic war with Russia now. And I want to see economic measures put forward by the Prime Minister that makes that clear.
OK, Crispin Blunt, appreciate your time, as always, joining us there from Parliament. Thank you very much indeed, Conservative MP, and we urge you to hear from the Prime Minister in the next hour or so. Of course, there'll be live coverage of that here on GB News. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Nigel says, is it possible to put sanctions on those countries that are supporting Russia in their actions? John says, our Prime Minister talks about democracy and protecting Ukraine. What about Tibet and other small countries being ruled by more powerful ones? And Bill says, difficult to see how the West can come up with answers to Putin while Biden is in the White House. Biden views on foreign wars are well known. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Always get in touch. OK, that is it from me for today. Olin Foster is here at 3 tomorrow. Up next, continuing coverage with Colin Brazier. But first, here's the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. It might be windy and cold out there this afternoon. There may be some rain, hail and snow showers as well, but there is also some sunshine, increasingly so for southern and eastern parts of the country. But towards the northwest, some tricky conditions around this evening with further rain, hail and hill snow. That snow building up over the higher parts of North Wales, Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. But eventually, overnight, the showers ease. And then the main cause for concern are icy patches as temperatures in the north dip to 0 or -1 Celsius and in the south 3 or 4 degrees. So a cold start to Friday, but a ridge of high pressure is building in, and that will at least help to settle things down during Friday itself. It's looking like a decent day. Still 1 or 2 showers around southwest Scotland, northwest England into the Midlands first thing on Friday, but otherwise actually widespread sunshine breaking out. And after that chilly start with a few slippery surfaces, it soon warms up. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in the south. Cardiff, London, Southampton, for example. 7 or 8 for Aberdeen, Glasgow, 9 in Belfast. Plenty of sunny spells then, feeling fine with the lighter winds compared to recent days and weeks. But for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, it turns cloudier through the afternoon and into the evening, and we'll see some rain move quite quickly across, not causing too many issues. And then it's generally light and patchy rain for the higher parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland as we start off the weekend. Increasingly breezy towards the northwest on Saturday, but plenty of sunshine for England, for Wales, for eastern Scotland. There'll be some brighter spells as well. And Saturday is also, for most, looking like a fine day. We keep the sunny skies for England and Wales, cloudier for Scotland and Northern Ireland, increasingly windy for western Scotland with gales. But by Sunday, that wind eases again with some rain at first.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't